Alright, so in this video we're going to be writing a Python script that will allow us to send an email automatically via Gmail. So you can think of a number of potential use cases for such a script. One example might be that you're writing some code yourself, and let's say the code that you're writing takes quite a while to execute, and you want to receive some notification that the code that you're writing executed either successfully or perhaps it failed, and you want to convey certain pieces of information of that failure or success to you. So one way you can convey that information and be notified of it is through email. So you can just plug in the script that will write in between your code and have it send in that information to you, and you can be notified, on your phone or via your computer or however you get your email these days, if you're watching it in the future in your mind. Anyway, so that's one possible use case, but there's probably lots of different use cases that you can imagine as well. So I'm just going to be somewhat agnostic about what you're going to use it for and just kind of dive right into the actual script itself. So one thing that I will mention is we will be making use of the library smtplib. So if you don't already have this installed, then what I would recommend you do is say pip install smtplib. So if you go ahead and run that, that will install the necessary library that you'll need to run this script. I already have it installed, so I will not run this line. If you don't have it, go ahead and run it. Otherwise, let's go ahead and start writing the script. So I'm going to write a Python file. I'm going to create one called sendemail.py. So that'll just be a Python file I'm creating, and we'll go from there. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to write a function. Let's call the function send email. It just happens to be coincidentally the same name as the file. You can call it whatever you like. And then this function is going to take two arguments, a subject and a message. So just like you have in an email, a subject line, and then the message, the body of the email. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a try here. So we're going to try to establish a connection between the script and the Gmail server, and if this doesn't work, then we'll have an exception and we'll be notified of a failure, that the email wasn't successfully sent. So let's try this first. Let's define a variable called server, and this will be equal to smtplib.smtp. And then if you're using Gmail, which I assume you are because that's what this tutorial is based on, what you'll put here is smtp.gmail.com:587. Now if you're using a different email provider like Yahoo or some other email provider, then you would probably change the argument in this in these parentheses. Since I'm using Gmail, this is what I'm going with. You can consult the SMTP library documentation to figure out what would be the appropriate parameter there. But assuming you're using Gmail, that's what you go with. And then the general protocol for establishing a connection between the server is saying server is server.ehlo and then server.startTLS. So once you do that, then you can say server.login, and then in this function we're going to pass it two things: the email for the address and then also the password for your Gmail address. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say config.email address and config.password. Now I haven't defined either of these things yet, but what we're going to do is we're going to define a configuration file called config.py. We're going to store the email and password credentials in that file, and then here we're going to access them directly, so that way you can modify it or change it, and it can also be obscured from this particular script. So actually I'm going to do a few things up here. One is I need to import smtplib because we're making use of that. The other thing, I'm going to import config, and again, this file we haven't created yet. This is where we're going to store our configuration information. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for the time being, save this file and create a new file in the same directory called config.py. So this is going to consist of our configuration information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say email address is equal to some string, and then password is equal to some string. So of course what you would do is you would go ahead in this file and fill in between the quotes the Gmail address that you're using and the corresponding password, and then you'd save it. I'm not going to put in that information here for obvious reasons, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that you've done that, and I'm going to quit I'm going to save and quit that file. Okay, so that's where line 10 is extracting the credentials from. It's extracting it from that configuration file that we've written previously in the one that we just closed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a variable called message, and it's going to be equal to subject colon open curly brace, close curly brace, and then some new lines for just to make it nice and clean. And then we're going to send into this message both the subject that we're getting passed into the function as well as the message body. So then what we're going to do once we've established that is we're going to say server.send mail, and then we're just going to pass it the email address. So this is actually a config.email address, and the config.password. Let's see, I call the password, that would be why. Password, and then also, and it's config.password, not conf. And also the message, so the message that we defined the line above. So then, hopefully, the email will have been sent and will quit the server. So that's if everything goes well. Now, if something happens where any of the above fail, we'll hit this accept. And basically, for now, we'll just kind of keep this exception quite simple. We'll say print email failed to send. So we'll put that there. And actually, we can put a message after the server quits here to let us know that we've actually successfully sent an email. We could say success email sent. So that's pretty much the bulk of what we need to do in the Python script. Now there's a few things you'll need to do in your Gmail account to allow this to work. So I'm going to go navigate over to my Gmail account here. So one thing you'll need to do is navigate to this website here, which I'll link to in the description. And essentially what you need to do is you need to turn this allow less secure apps on. So this isn't particularly ideal if this is your main email address, because this leaves your email more susceptible to hacks and just insecurity. So this is probably not the most ideal way to go about it, but if you have kind of a throwaway email address that you want to do this with, that's what I would recommend. So go ahead and turn this to the on state, so that way we can use the Python file to interact with our Gmail address. So once you've done that, navigate it to the website and turn that on for the account you'll be using. We can go back and we can try to run this script and actually send an email. One thing I noticed before we proceed is that there is an error in line 12. I believe email address should be here instead of password. So let me just put email address there. So it's there twice, and then the message, we quit the server, we succeed if that all goes well, fail if not, and let's go ahead and run this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define just a very simple string. Let's just call this test subject, and then we'll say message is equal to hello there, how are you today? Are you today? How are you today? How about that? And then what we'll do is we'll say send email, and then we'll pass in the subject and message. And if we run this, hopefully everything goes as planned. I'm just going to run Python send email. If we do that, we get the success email sent, and you can see here that we get this email, test subject, hello there, how are you today? So let's go back to the terminal. And I just want to kind of make a note that these strings can be much more elaborate than just, a sentence or two. You can put in error messages, or even, possibly math that you're working with that you convert to strings, any pertinent information for whatever you have to be doing. So you can really take this and run with it. I just am keeping it quite simple here for the sake of example and for the sake of simplicity, but you can make it a lot more intricate than what it currently is. So I hope that was helpful to you, and if you have any questions, comments, or anything else, please do let me know in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.